right now on Higher Journeys Radio with Alexis Brooks. There's no sugarcoating this. According to veteran numerologist Sharon Millstein, 2020 is going to be a year of extremes. We're not only heading into a brand new decade, but also what is known as the 4-year. Why is this number so significant in what Sharon sees coming in 2020? And when was the last time we saw a 4-year that started off a new decade, which also gave us one of the most extreme periods in our late modern history? Buckle up, everyone, as we discuss this and more in our annual forecast by the numbers with Sharon Millstein. Since today's show will be heavily focused on numbers, we might as well start off with a significant one. That is for me and the guest you are about to hear from. This is the 7th year my dear friend, esteemed numerologist Sharon Millstein joins our show. The 7th, big number, lucky 7. For the last 6 years, Sharon has been sharing her wisdom, much of which is derived from the magical world of numbers after decades of work in this fine art and science, I might say. I know I've always been fascinated by how integral a role numbers play in our lives, and they seem to be appearing more significant to more of us on this planet these days. Now, this year coming up is a big one, no matter how you slice it. Not only are we entering a brand new decade, there's also been a lot of chatter over what's coming in 2020 from a mystical perspective. They've called it the year of ascension, a cosmic shift, the great awakening, etc. So many terms are being used to describe our entry into this coming year and new decade. So, Sharon, let me start out by asking you, do any of these terms resonate with you? I mean, cosmic shift, ascension, awakening, when it comes to how you would describe the year 2020?
100%.
Really?
Oh, my goodness.
Welcome, Sharon. I love that. We'll start with a laugh. I love
try.
That.
People want to bottle my laugh for some reason. I've heard this so many times, and I can't imagine why
infectious.
It's so different than anybody else's.
Oh, it is, but that's another. That's another.
Well, I guess my passion comes out through my laugh, and that's good. That's an awakening in
Absolutely.
a sense, and it's an attention-giving attribute that I might have here.
Absolutely. So speaking of awakening, so all this resonates with you. Why so 2020?
Wow. So we're going into a 4-year, and it is a shakeup. It is going to be a shakeup to the core. I try to be as positive of a reader as I can, but I have to tell you that we can see things being shaken up right now with impeachment things and weather and all kinds of things that we can get into after. But the number 4 is a little bit of a hard edge as opposed to the 3 that we talked about, and you mentioned about it being opened. It looked like an opened number 8. It wasn't closed, it was opened. Mm-hmm. And it certainly was open for unveiling, as we also mentioned the predictions last year, of being open and receptive and unveiling a lot of secrets and conspiracies. So it also had to do with creative energy and also AIs, UFOs, and everything. There was more sightings this year in 2019 than ever. But the 4 is different. If you can visualize, and I know you have this wonderful ability to sort of visualize things in its depth. And number 4 has a lot of straight lines.
I can't believe you brought this up. You beat me to it. But go ahead. It was going to come up. It came to my mind.
Well, because and I could sort of read you also, and we sort of put our minds together that way. But number 4 has the straight lines, and it really indicates a lot of work. And it also has to do with limitations. There's no curves there. Like the 3 or the 2, the 8, the 9 has circles or curves, and that has to do with a little bit more of a feminine kind of vibe. And with the 4, it has to do with moving ahead in a very strong way.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to get more conversations about all things intriguing, inspiring, and unusual, be sure to subscribe to Higher Journeys on YouTube. And once you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell to receive an announcement as soon as a new episode is posted. And now, back to our show.
And it has to do with work and keeping your nose to the grindstone and really doing nothing but working in a work year so that you could sort of offset any hard aspects that really could be coming in 2020. So it has to do with limitation. It has to do with sacrifice, which could happen if a person is not focused and really approaching things in a very steady way. Some people say that the 4 is a very masculine number because there aren't any round curves, it's very straight. But in a lot of holy biblical times, people look at that as really a time of really karmically trying to reduce the karma that could happen. So it has to do with gaining knowledge and wisdom, which is very good. So we can see that as we move into the 4-year 2020, and focus and take that steady approach. But it also has to do with, if you said, Sharon, give me 2 words to describe, well, maybe 3 words to describe number 4. And it's hard to pack it all into 3 words, but I would say work, order, and I would say discipline.
Wow.
So,
okay.
But it's even more than that. It has to do with the biblical idea that 4 was a very female number, and it represents the 4 matriarchs, which is Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel, and Leah. So those were the 4 matriarchs that we look up to as being very heavily into being honorable people, teachers, and being very honorable, and sort of setting an example for having integrity and such, and love.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so this is a time as we move forward here, building foundations for the future. And that's what 4 is, because it's a work number, it's a number of organization and order, and it has to do with building for the future. And it has to do with, it's almost like the master number 22.
Okay, there we go.
Those are the, those are the only numbers in 2020, is the 2.
That's right. Okay.
And then 2 is, we know, a female number, very much so. But it has to do with taking something small and making something big out of it. It has to do with being strong, and that's what the number 4 represents. Strength. Having the strength to avoid any hard aspects and challenges, so you must keep your nose to the grindstone and work. And you'll gain that knowledge and wisdom if you take that steady approach. So it's very important that we adhere to a little more discipline than we've been all having. People have been having screens in their faces, talking about all the AIs and digital electronics and all this kind of stuff that I always seem to bring up. And it really has to do with going back to the basics, really. That's what 4 is, the basics, where people worked by the sweat of their brow to be able to accomplish their goals. They had to use their discipline so that they could avoid any outside stimuli and they could stay focused. And they brought home their paycheck. And things were simple many years ago, of course. They paid the rent or the mortgage, and telephone maybe, gas, electric, and that was it pretty much, you know. You went to the store and you had cash or a check, not as much checks, maybe more cash. And you worked from paycheck to paycheck. And now we see people who are millionaires and billionaires who take a banana and tape it to a wall and sell it for 120,000, and one sold for 150,000. Frivolous. While there are people hungry in this country, hungry.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's just beyond bizarre. We have gone off track in many ways. I remember that we talked about progress and regress last radio show, and that brings up the AI thing. You know, so people put cameras so they could have their home safe and their babies safe with baby monitors, and progress and regress, as you had mentioned last radio show.
Right. Let me.
Now. Yes.
I'm going to interject because you're packing in a lot there, and I want to try to take. It's hard to take one thing at a time because, like you said, there's a hard edge. There are a lot of dimensions, literally, even in looking at the number 4.
There's a lot.
But let me go back, Sharon, because there are a couple of things I want to stay on, and then we'll kind of progress, maybe regress too, as we should. Going back to my initial question, however, in terms of, now maybe we're talking about two different things. When the talk that's occurring now, and perhaps this is just par for the course when we're entering a new decade. You know, the last time was 2000, and you know the big computer glitch or whatever. I forgot how they even put it back then. It seems so long ago. But big changes seem to come or be implicit of coming into a new decade. Now, this particular one, from I think more of a mystical perspective, maybe less numerological and more mystical in terms of the cosmic connection that is said to be happening, where the frequency of the planet and at least beckoning the frequency of humans to raise. This is what I'm talking about. Now, does that go with what you're saying? It sounds like we're talking about what you're saying is a big regress back to the basics. But what's happening energetically? What's happening energetically? Is there anything to that?
You know, I'm trying to understand where you're going, and I'm having a little difficulty because it's not a regress. It just has to do with the numbers from 1 through 9 plus number 11 and 22 that are master numbers. And it has to do with cycles. You know, it has to do with beginning things as we did in the number 1 year. And with the 2 year, it had to do with joining forces. It's a dual number, and 3 has to do with communications and creative energy and unveiling maybe some conflicts, and 4 has to do with, you know, getting down to work. And so it's part of life. It's part of our cycles, and it goes on and on. It goes on and on. So basically, the most important thing is that we have to realize our boundaries and our limitations as well, okay? We have to have strength because this number 4 is a very powerful number. It is a number of wisdom, but it has to do with, you know, building a solid creations of being focused and what we really want to get out of it. What is the ultimate goal? So, am I answering your question about that? It's all about cycles. It's not about regression.
Well, that's not the. That's not the that wasn't really the focus of my question in terms of are we regressing, but rather there are two kind of different conversations going on here, and I'm trying to see if we can bridge them. The first conversation that I think, if I were to sum it up, Sharon, would have to do with the esoteric or mystical aspect of what people have been talking about is coming in the year 2020. Again, I think this is less from a numerological perspective and more from a mystical, again, esoteric perspective. We're talking about ascension, awakening, all of these sort of new age terms that I tend to take with a grain of salt, but I'm still looking at that. That's what I wanted to get your take on, but also bridging it with the number significance. Do you understand what I'm asking there? Have you heard that discussion going on about 2020 is the big year of ascension and awakening? Are you familiar with that?
I think the awakening has to do with going back to a simpler time.
Okay.
And also a very karmic time. It has to do with paying past debts in a sense. Now, normally the number 8 is a karmic number, but every number has a little bit of each vibration in it. And ascending, to me, the ascending has to do with going within.
Yeah.
It's more of a personal growth and acknowledgement that outside of us is not where our happiness will lie.
Well, sure.
It has to do with inside. So if you want to call that ascension, that's fine. I just call it going back to the basics, and maybe that is enlightenment. That will be enlightenment in a sense.
I can see that. I can absolutely see that. Again, I think we're coming from slightly different entry points, but I think there's always a bridge that can be made. So we won't put a lot of emphasis on perhaps I actually just did a show or two ago with a lovely woman named Christine Day. I don't know if you had a chance to hear that, where we really did focus
not yet.
The cosmic connection that people feel is built into 2020. And I'm not saying that I believe or disbelieve. I just wanted to get your perspective. But you make a very good point, Sharon, in that if the number 4 denotes going back to the basics, having that hard edge, putting your nose to the grindstone, maybe that's the key to ascension. That's a good point that you're making. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's interesting that you bring up 22, because that was another question I had for you in terms of, we went into this back in, 2018, that I believe I was calling it a 2-year. And you quickly corrected me and said, well, no, it's actually because it's 11. You don't break it down to the single digit. I thought, okay, well, if that's the case, would the same apply here? Are we talking about a 4-year first, or are we talking about what would be a 22 or 22/4? So talk about that a little bit.
Well, and that depends on an individual if they want to reduce themselves down to living the life of the 4 as opposed to the 22. They're closely connected. The 22 is the most powerful of the master numbers, by the way. And that, again, has to do with building, taking something small and making something big out of it. But when a numerologist looks at numbers, and the ultimate number right there now that we're talking about, the 2020, is a number 4 year, we still have to look at the individual parts. Just like when a numerologist looks at somebody's address and they say, what do you think of this house I want to buy? You said it's a good year for me to invest, and here's my address. Well, I look at the address with all the numbers, but then I also have to look at the zip code. And so everything has to be acknowledged, because they're all elements of the essence of the vibration. They're all elements. So a person who is in a 22 year, and we can get into that because later on, whenever you feel, to go over what people's personal year are and how that will affect them with the universal year of 2020, which is another interesting thing. So if they reduce themselves down, then it will be living the life of the 4. and this is a very complex thing because it's not 22 together, it's 2 and then another 2 after. So there's a lot of different ways of, it's very faceted, is what I mean.
Okay. Okay. Wow. I have to say I'm a little bit surprised, not in a bad or a good way, but just interesting that it would, I guess there's this preconceived notion, and I'm guilty of it as well. Oh boy, here we go, 2020. It just sounds powerful. It sounds, we're entering into a new decade. It seems that it's going to be something different than that because of the 4-year. I don't know. I need to really...
it is a new decade, and there are new principles that will be defined in the new decade, and this is a little complex because in numerology, of course, we break down compound numbers into the single digits for the essence, except for 11 and 22, the master numbers that we have to actually show what it would be reduced to, but we're not allowed to reduce it in writing. And so the 22 is very masterful. It really is. So where 4 has to do with working, paying attention to details, keeping everything organized, the 22, which is very high mentality number, very high. In fact, if a person had a number 22 in one of their numbers, they could really, if they misused their power, they could really put somebody under. But they're separated by the 2020, separated by the 0, which is a little of everything. It's not anything particular. But the 22 is taking that small thing while you're working. It's the work number, no matter how you look at it, and just expanding on it and making something huge. And it has to do with the mentality of the person or the number 22. It's a very strong, powerful number. And in a way, you can say it's strong and powerful if a person had a 22 and if they weren't honorable and misused their power. But in the 22, it sort of brings everything together in a very strong way. Can it be positive? It can be positive. But all of my studying, 50 years worth actually, has brought me to understand that everything is relevant, especially the numbers are relevant. Mm-hmm. And so, the mission in our life, or the mission for man, is for his spiritual growth and to lose fear. To lose the fear because everything is destined and divine. And also to give love, to render service and ultimately to seek enlightenment. But we've gone off the path and we're sort of getting ready for this number 4. Every year by October, 3 months before the new year, we could actually start feeling the vibrations of the new year coming in.
I've heard you say that before, yeah.
So we see this with a lot of political dissonance, with weather that's been erratic and so on. And we can talk more about that as you may.
Well, I'm looking here at the last time we had a 4-year, Sharon, was 1930. Now, it didn't add up to 22, but it was a 4-year. No. Can we derive any significance between different 4 years? 1930, now we're going into 2020. What was happening then?
I think so, because we have things now that we never had then. And talking
what were the
about
similarities?
The AIs.
What were some of the patterns? You'd have to go back and what happened in 1930 quick. I can't remember.
Well, I think in 1930 quick it had to do with survival more than it has to do with right now.
Depression. It was a depression
survival
period. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yes, it is interesting because we're going to have the same set of circumstances in the coming year in a different modality because we have different things now than we did in 1930. So people were waiting on bread lines then. People were throwing themselves off roofs when they had nothing. And we see that now. We see a lot of dissonance right now coming in the light, and it has to do with, the violence, people dying, suicides are up, all of these things, of survival, but in a different way, you see. People that are looking outside of themselves for entertainment and hurting other people, and then it was a little more simplistic. It was, is there bread and meat on the table?
Right.
And if not, what do we do here?
Right.
But everything is different now. Everything is, I was born in the 40s, okay? And everything is very, very complicated, a lot more complication, where people have been sort of pushed to going outside of themselves. But that's what I'm saying is that this new year that's coming about has to do with us going inside and using our own stamina and endurance to be able to survive. And it's in a different way. But it has to do with simplicity. Going back to the main thing in life, which was in the 30s, trying to have a job,
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
And trying to put food on the table and pay the bills. It was very simple in that sense.
It could be the more, as the cliche goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I just did a quick look up. I should be ashamed of myself. I should know this, although I was not born. I wasn't here in the 30s. But of course, the Great Depression was in the 30s. The Great Depression, another 4-year. This is kind of giving me a little bit of a chill here. Might we be... Wow. Okay. I don't want people to be depressed. And I think people are feeling, and I certainly can't speak for everyone, but I do think there's a consensus, Sharon, of having been in a state of survival, whatever that means in this 21st century, working hard and not getting anywhere, and problems and tumult. And I think people are kind of looking for a little bit, I don't know that anything is ever going to go back to a simpler time, but people are looking for some sort of elevation in the way they live. But like you said, it can't come without work and going within. So it sounds a little scary, I will say. 4 years sounds a little scary, but
yes,
we can turn something small into something big. That's, to me, what I would take thus far.
Yes, if we utilize the understanding of the 22, because there's 2 twos there, and we certainly have choices. In fact, if I had to describe this spiritual life of our hearts beating and our ability to breathe and be here right now in this very complex order of things, we live and we accumulate people in our lives and experiences and everything, and we do the best we can. Some people don't. But, ultimately, we leave, and we're here right now. And the most important thing is to have the gratitude. And sometimes we have to have this limitation and sacrifice, because that's exactly where we're going, in order to see the good. And let me tell you this little story, if I may, a very short little story that actually was a true story. And it was from a long time ago, probably in Europe, where a man went to his clergyman. He said, I don't know what to do. The house is so small. My wife and I are just, bumping into each other. We don't really have space. I can't really afford another house. And, it's just getting us down. And the clergyman says, okay. And this was the time where people farmed, and that's how they ate and such. So the clergyman said, okay, here's what you do. He was a very magical, clergyman. He said, I want you to put a goat in your house. The man says, a goat in my house? And the clergyman says, yes. You put a goat in your house. And this clergyman was well known for his mystical seeing, his ability to be able to see and be very mystical. So the man put a goat in his house. He went back to the clergyman and said, I can't really take this. I mean, the goat is dirty and the house smells and we have less room now, Well, I don't understand. So the clergyman says, well, I want you to put another goat in your house. And the man says, another goat in my house? We're already confined here. And it's almost unlivable. But the man was very respectful to the clergyman because this was a very mystical clergyman. He says, okay, if that's what you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. So he puts another goat in his house. He goes back to the clergyman after a while. He says, I can't take it anymore. Things are so bad. It's worse than ever. We're confined to our beds. There's no really place to walk. My wife has to clean and I have to keep order and there's just not any room. And the clergyman says to him, okay, I want you to take both of those goats and put them back outside. So the man looks up and he says, okay, I'm going to do what you said. And he takes the goats and he puts the goats outside and he goes back to the clergyman and the clergyman says, so how are you doing? He said, I am so grateful. We have space. We have a clean house. We can move around. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is the lesson.
Simple. I had a feeling that's where it was going because all things are relative. It
has to do with being grateful.
It has to do with being grateful. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I want to use this time to bring something else in that kind of occurred to me. And it's, has to do with vision. We use the term 20/20 vision when it comes to visual acuity, to do perfect eyesight or vision. We also say hindsight is 20/20. Again, meaning looking back, you see things perfectly. Sharon, could it be that this coming year has something to do with vision and seeing reality in another way, in a more clear way, seeing reality for what it really is? That occurred to me as we move into 2020.
Yes. Well, you have an amazing mind, Alexis. You really do.
It just,
you
I don't know how amazing.
Deep. Yeah, you dig deep, and you do it in such a smooth way. And yes, the answer is yes. 2020. That our vision 2020 is supposed to be the best, to be able to see,
right?
Or even in hindsight, to be able to connect the dots. And actually, we really have to sacrifice ourselves through work and hardship in order to grow and achieve and understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, that
and then we see differently. Once we do that, we're able to see on a very different level.
Right. Well, that's why it occurred to me. I was typing out something, and things will just kind of pop into your mind, and I thought,
oh yeah,
vision, hindsight. But it's all about seeing with the third eye, seeing from an internal perspective. But 2020, if there is more than just metaphor in these numbers, then there's something deeper.
Well, it's a 22. Here. Yeah. It's a 22. That's the most powerful master number, and it has to do with, like I said, creating in a sense on a larger, building on a larger foundation. and taking something small and developing. So it has to do with the time of development as well. Growth, completion, of the spirit, the mind, the soul, which is in a way pitted against the four elements. So work and endurance has to, by the sweat of our brow, has to do with gaining the prosperity and position that we feel like we want, so we can get the acknowledgement and keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. The two, if we just look at the twos, the two is a dual number representing love, relationships, and diplomacy. That's what the twos are. And perhaps we're going to see more of this in 2020, but we still have some harsh environment to get through. And when I say environment, I mean of what we're going to be handed, from above, the divine understanding that we all go through different cycles. And even personally, when we go from one decade, one age to another age, we see things in a very deeper way than we ever did before. Mm-hmm. So the twos have to do with, working together and using other people's ideas, actually. That's what the twos are. It has to do with partnerships and associations and working together. And when the twos aren't working, then it becomes a problem of cooperation, really, because everybody has their own truth. And so one person working with another person, they have different worlds and different, truths. So to be able to be diplomatic and understand where the other person's coming from with their own history and their own buttons that are being pressed, then we can kind of bridge things, as you say, mm-hmm. and help move forward. But really, we're going into a place of building for the future, and that means working hard, paying attention to details, and having a steady approach, having strength to get through some of these hard aspects. It has to do with, building and intellect. So we are going into another decade, which in a way is refreshing. But, I believe that we're going to be getting a lot of, or at least experiencing a lot of conflict. Mm-hmm. In many different modalities. It's a time of conflict, and we see this since October of this year. So, using our discipline, even when we don't want to keep our nose down to the grindstone, and we use our discipline to do that and stay focused, that's where we're going to avoid some of these hard things. So when you talk about, new age words and people thinking, this is a time where we're going to, really raise our conscious level and life is going to be understood more and things are going to be straightened out or at least calmed down, it's not happening.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough, yeah. Well, it could be both. It could be both. And again, we speak very broadly in terms of collective reality. There's so many different variations, and I suppose it depends on where the individual is on their own, forgive the cliche, journey. But it could very well be both. It could be both, depending on where you are in your own process.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's where the 22 could be reduced to a 4 in its simplicity. It's a very personal thing, but on a global level, there is a lot of strength that we need to use to combat the battle. There's a battle of manifestation, a battle of keeping order, a battle of completion and growth, a battle of endurance, because we need to endure some of these hard times like you talked about in 1930. It's a time of using discipline so we can accomplish and stay stay centered and grounded, as opposed to being so stimulated by outside stimuli.
That's right. Yeah.
It has to do with understanding and discovery, and the only way that we can discover is really to go inside, because people who sort of get bored and have to have constant stimulation are not looking at the refreshing state of mind of changing their own way and approach to things. So, in a way, that's a dichotomy also. So we see this. We're going to see this all over the charts. We're going to see it with the erratic weather and the erratic political drama that's not going to stop. The juxtaposition of homelessness in America and banana art.
I love that one. I don't know where you pulled that one out. Taping a banana to a wall. I've got to remember that one.
And then, the man who buys it is very happily to eat it in front of the cameras. And if he isn't, I have a lot of words I could say about that. Oh. What about giving the banana to a hungry person to eat, man? Yeah. I don't know. I just think that things have been upside down, and the crux of all of that, the karma from that, is coming in 2020. I'm sorry to say.
There you go. There you go. I don't know that you can sugarcoat that. Why should you?
I can't.
It's about truth.
I really,
right.
Yeah, I really can't. Yeah. Every few years we do the show, and I give you an idea of what elements are going to affect us, right?
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask that question next. Which one would you assign for this year?
Well, that's very complex, because number 4 has to do with water, okay? And some people say it has to do with earth. There's a couple of different, again, dichotomy. What I'm saying is that the 4 elements, wind or air, earth, fire, water, it's all going to be happening because it's number 4, the 4 elements. It's going to be across the board. Mm-hmm. Across the board.
That's interesting. Yeah. That is interesting. That was the next question. We're definitely on the same track. And I wondered, 4 elements, integration of them. There, so many different approaches you could take to how to look at whatever you're dealing with. The idea that just came to my mind is transmutation, a word that was used recently on the show, of taking the 4 elements and alchemizing them to one, reducing it perhaps to one perennial element. I don't know. I'm just kind of playing with this thought for a moment. But because you've got everything up on the board here, the air, earth, water, fire, might we have a smorgasbord. Let's look at, I'm going to take the glass half full approach. We have a smorgasbord. We have choices, and perhaps the ability for some of us, depending on where we are, to transmute those elements, to alchemize, to shift.
Well, right. Alchemize.
To change.
Yeah. But number 4 is number 4. Straight lines. Number 4 has to do with each individual 4 elements. They are all going to be in effect. They're not going to be gathered like, windy mud or something, earth and water and wind. And no, we're going to see them. We may see them sometimes at the same time, but it's going to be extreme. Mm-hmm. Just like the political stage is extreme, the violence is extreme, the weather's extreme. We're going into a time, and in a way, it's good. It's good because it's going to push us, catapult us into maybe thinking, maybe into raising our conscious level,
Mm-hmm.
because it's only when we're on our knees that we go inside and get it and mine our gems, as I mentioned in the past. We're going to be struggling for existence. That is the truth. The 4 directions, the 4 elements, everything is going to wreak havoc. And that is the truth. So, you talk about progress and regress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, isn't it a great idea to put a baby monitor in the room so we could actually see if the baby's okay? Mm-hmm. Now there's strangers hacking baby monitors.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Yes.
And that the baby is so not safe. The child is so not safe. We thought we were going to do that for safety. There is no safety, because karmically it's all coming down and it's being exposed and it's being turned inside out. Inside out. Mm-hmm. And inside out, we're going to see all of the stitches. We're going to see the threads hanging. The textile is not going to be smooth. It's going to be inside out. People who are looking outside of themselves for entertainment and trying to do things to express their anger, it's going to get worse. When they start shooting up a nursing home, which I heard the other day, mm-hmm. plus all of the other places that we thought were safe, movie theaters, schools, elementary schools, libraries, concerts, we thought we'd have a good time. It's none of it. The safety has gone.
Right. Well, this has been going on for years, and perhaps the bottom has to fall out before it can, but it has to be turned inside out, and before we can, yeah. So, and I think that's a very natural process, but it is hard. I wasn't expecting a flowers and butterflies conversation here, but yikes. I just made up a new word. Yowza.
Yeah, yowza. Global crises, climate change, leadership moving at a snail's pace to stop things that are just totally immoral, unjust, and carbon emissions that are just being poured out there, and we're killing the earth, and we're moving at a snail's pace. Now children are getting involved globally because they realize how they are being affected and how they will be affected. It's just the wind is going to spiral upward. And the pressure of it all has to do with the ocean surface that's going to produce wildness in our weather, in our elements.
Right. That's a very contentious issue that I'm not going to touch today, because there are so many. We know, obviously, there's a lot of controversy. I have no doubt that there's climate change. The question is, what is the impetus, or what is the origin of it? But that said, listen, I'm looking at this clock, and we've got about 15 minutes left, my dear.
Is that so?
That is so. So here's what I want to do. Okay. We're going to shift from doomsday. No, I'm kidding. It's not doomsday, people. I had to throw that in. Let's lighten this up a little bit. I want to get into, because it's always fun when you start talking about how individuals can start to glean their own numbers and see how how their individual numbers plug into the macro, the larger numbers. So I want to spend the balance of our time on that, because I know there's some upside to all of this. I'm going to let you just have at it, and you tell us how one might use their own numbers positively in this time that we're going into.
Well, we could go in certain directions right now, and one would be for people out there to have some kind of tool to be able to look at some of their numbers. We can't do them all, But I remember last year we looked at how a person would see their personal vibration number, and now if you think it's a good time to look at everybody's personal year and how that would be correlated with our universal year that we're going into 2020.
Let's do it. Go for it.
Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of a work on finding out what is our personal year. We all go through a personal year from 1 through 9, plus 11 and 22, okay? And I'm going to teach you how to do that, and then I can give you a little bit of how that's going to influence an individual. So, if you take a person's month and year, and maybe we should make up a month and year so we could figure this out, right?
Okay, let's take June. How about June 15th? Oh, the month. What about the day?
Only the month and year.
Only
for
the month
this
and year.
particular
Oh, okay.
Formula, yeah.
So let's say June 1957. June.
No, the month and the day. Excuse me, the month and the day.
Oh, I see.
I made a mistake. Yeah, the month and the day. So say June 24th. Can we do that?
Very good.
Okay. So everybody take your month, whatever month you're born on, January through December, and it has a number, right? January's 1 and February's 2 and so on. And now we come to number 6, if we're as this example. So the month is a 6, and we put down on a piece of paper 6, plus we look at the day that we were born. Okay, there's so many formulas, so I have to focus on this right now. So the day is 24, and 2 and 4 are 6 using numerology. It just happens to be. So now we have 12, right? If we add those two sixes together, the month and the day, and that will come out to a 3. Is that correct? 3.
Okay.
We take that number 3 from our month and day, and we add it to the universal year, which 2020 is going to be a 4, right? And then we ultimately come out to a 7. And 7 is the number that we will look at in combination with the universal year. So that means that this person, we'll call her Jane, who's born on June 24th, she is going to be in a 7 personal year.
That's the personal
and
year.
Then,
okay.
Yeah, because we all go through a personal year as opposed to the universal year, which is going to be 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 7, we look at 7 plus the 4 in combination so we can see how it will affect the person. So let's start from the beginning. If we have a number 1, in other words, somebody added their month and day and broke it down to a single digit, and it comes out to number 1. So we look at 1 and number 4, right? Because 1 is new beginnings, creating new ideas, instituting new plans, forging ahead, individuality, meaning that a person may work more alone than they would with other people, and also that they'll find their own way, because we all do things different, but maybe come out with the same conclusion, so to speak. So 4 is work. We already know that, and it has to do with keeping your nose to the grindstone and organizing. And then we have the 1, which is rebirth in a way, right? It's rebirth and starting and beginning, because number 1 is the first number in which all the other numbers follow. So we could actually see that this person who has this number 1 as a personal vibration number, not meaning that it's their personal year, they will have a beginning of a new way to work, you know?
I see.
Yeah. So now let's look at the number 2 now. If a person takes their month and day and they break that down and add it to the 4 personal year, and it comes out to a 2, it has to do with working with others, because dual is 2 is the dual number representing partnerships, associations, cooperation. So that's the 4 and the 2. Now, are you following me so far? Because I know if you are, then other people are.
Well, I was going to say the main thing is as long as the journeyers are following, and I'm sure you can listen to it as many times as you want. So I'll probably have to go back and but I think I get the gist of it. That's fascinating.
So what you're doing is just taking your month that you were born on, your day that you were born on, adding that together, just like Jan was born on June 24th. That's a 6 plus a 6 is a 12, which equals a 3, right? And we add that 3 to the 4, which is the universal year 2020, and we come out with a 7. Mm-hmm. So she's in a personal year of a 7 going into a universal year of a 4, and how is that going to affect her?
I see. Okay, so here's the part. Now, I don't know if you journeyers got stuck where I did, but when you say universal year, you're not saying 4 as that number. You're saying 2020. So you're adding 2 plus, what did she have, the 7? So you're adding 7 plus the 4.
No, because it already...
That's true. Okay, I'm kidding.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad we're working on this, because that means other people will understand it better, and I want to help them.
It's still going to come down to a 4, right? Because I gotcha. I think I got it.
Okay, so this is only one formula. There are so many formulas that a numerologist looks at to get the essence of the vibration that's going to affect them.
Sure.
And so now let's continue. If a person has a 3. And again, it's the month and it's the day added together with the universal year 2020, which is a 4. And if you come out with a 3, if that's your ultimate number, that's what I'm going to read for you right now. So if you are in a 3 personal year, it's very creative energy. It's self-expression, creativity. It has to do with networking and stopping and smelling the roses. But that is and could be a problem in a number 4 year, because 4 is work and keeping your nose to the grindstone. So we have a little bit of a opposite thing happening there. Are you following me?
I sure am, yes.
Because 3 is work and creativity, but 4 is work, and 3 is creativity and self-expression. Excuse me. Okay. Now, if you do the formula and you end up with a 4 personal year, that you're in a 4 personal year, plus it's a 4 universal year, it has to do with being almost like a workaholic vibe. The vibe is like a workaholic because it's all 4s. And that person needs to be able to step back, just like an artist when they do a painting, they're using different intervals to step back and to look at their art from a different perspective, not do their art, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with a person being in a 4 personal year. They have to do the opposite, because now they're an alcoholic. Now they're a workaholic.
Alcoholic something.
Yeah. But so, it has to do with 4, and it has to do with work, and it might be too much work, so they have to step back and then go back to work after they had a break, you see. Mm-hmm. Now, if you come out to a number 5 with the formula that I talked about, 5 is the opposite of 4 also in a different way. It has to do with working on playing.
Working and playing? Working on
playing.
Oh, working on playing.
And I'll explain that. That number 5, which we're going to go into in the following year, 2021, that'll be a 5. But that's just off the subject in a minute here, but we can get a vibe of where we're going to go. 5 deals with the senses, touch and taste and feel and all that kind of stuff. But it's also a time of changing, and I call 5 the fun number, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, that's hard to keep working when you have a 5, which is a number of play, in a way, you see? Mm-hmm. So they have to use more discipline.
Right.
So then we have a number 6 personal year. 6 is the number of home and family and getting money due you. It has to do with the home. And if we add that to a number 4, we see that it has to do with working on your home and family kind of vibrations, you see. Mm-hmm. So there's different kind of work. If we come out to a number 7, it's sort of like a push and a pull, I call it. If you're in a 7 personal year, 7 is the number of the loner, but it's also the number of rest and meditation and inspiration and sort of being quiet, because it's sort of a time of rest and not overdoing. And the 4 is you're supposed to overdo and work. So that's hard to pull somebody from a time of being quiet and reserving oneself to working. You see how that's a conflict in a sense. Okay. And then we have the number 8. If your personal year is a number 8, that's kind of hard. The combination of 4 and 8 is hard, but you can reduce that again by...
that's 12, so it would be 3 if you reduced it, right? You said 8 and 4?
Well, no, we don't. No. The 8 already has the 4 in it. Okay. So when you're using a formula, all you need is your month, your day, and the universal year, which is a 4.
Right.
And so it comes out to an 8. You don't add 8 and 4 because the 4 is already added in there to make it an 8. So 8 is a number of karma. It's a number of money and energy, because money is energy. And then that's what we can deduce, but it's sometimes a very hard aspect. It's almost like a man going up a mountain with a load on his back, and he's going up the mountain and he's carrying this heavy load, and when he gets to the apex of the mountain, he realizes that his load was full of errors. Mm-hmm. So, people that are in a personal year of an 8 have to be very careful that all their expended energy is within their focus to be able to reach their benefits.
Okay. Keep going.
And then there's number 9. Number 9, again, has to do with ending, finishing, completing. It has to do with huge accomplishments. And we see that with looking at that with and combined to the number 8, the number 4. So we have a 9 and we have a 4. The 4 is the universal year. The 9 is a person's personal year. It's really important for them to finish things up while they're working, to take all the packages and put the bows on them and send them out, so to speak. And then, of course, we have number 11, and I'm going into an 11 year, actually, in 2020, and that's a master number, and it has to do with huge spiritual and psychic vibrations, really. It has to do with being the messenger of God and the seeker of the truth, but it also has to do with continuing your work effort. And then, of course, there's the 22, the 4, and the 22. Again, the 4 is the universal year. The 22 is the number that you get by adding your month, your day, and the 4 from the 2020. Because you want to see what you're going to be and how you're going to be affected in the year 2020. In 2020, that is a 4 year.
Wow.
So
that is,
it's pretty, yeah.
That is so helpful. We're over time, so I'm going to have to cut it off there. But this is, I was determined to keep my mouth shut and let you get that in, because this, I think, is the most valuable part, Sharon, for those that are listening, because we can, like I said, go back, listen to it again if you need to. I know I will.
That's right.
So we can determine where we are and use that as a guidepost. There's something extraordinarily fascinating and scientific about, in terms of accuracy with these numbers. So that is just amazing. Yeah. Closing thoughts. I'm going to give you 1 minute to close out this thought, and then we're going to shut it down for this here.
Well, our souls come in for certain reasons. I really do believe in numerology that we get recycled, so to speak, and that we will be, and our souls will end up being black, white, rich, poor, skilled, unskilled, and the whole gamut. And so right now in our life, we get to see what cycle we're in, what is our personal year, and how it will affect us in regards to 2020, which is a 4 universal year. That's the universal year and our personal year combined. There are many more formulas that we will get to maybe next time around, so that people could be able to develop some understanding in where they are, because numbers never lie. They're as old as the universe, and people can get in touch with me and have a reading done by phone.
I know that it's info@SharonMillstein.com, correct? Is that the same as?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make sure to have a link.
Thank
I think
you.
people need to reach out to Sharon because, like she said, this is just one of many different formulas. And for someone that's been doing it for decades, we're talking 50 years, that's a long time. And still, I'm sure she's learning. But if there's anyone that I would entrust my this work to, it would be Sharon for sure. So I highly recommend her. Sharon's been in my life for quite a few years now, and I'm so grateful to have her and call her a friend. So Sharon Millstein, as always, thank you ever so much, and Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. And
Happy New Year, happy holidays to all that are listening, and I'm very honored to be able to be present with you at this very time in life.
Well, thank you. We're always honored to have your presence on Higher Journeys, as with the journeyers as well. Thank you so much, everyone. We do appreciate your continuing to tune into Higher Journeys. We'll see you in 2020. Take care.